Hello everyone, my name is Robert Metters, and I am currently enrolled in Full Sail University's Music Production degree program. Today I'm going to be talking about an iconic record producer by the name of George Martin and the impact he has had on the music industry. George Martin was born on January 3, 1926, in London, England, and is well known for his work as a British record producer. George Martin attended Guildhall School of Music and Drama from 1947 to 1950, where he studied music composition and classical music orchestration, along with piano and oboe. After graduating from Guildhall School of Music and Drama in 1950, George Martin joined EMI as an assistant to Parlophone boss Oscar Pereus. George began his career by producing comedy records for artists such as Peter Ustinov, Peter Sellers, and Bernard Cribbins. After working at EMI for 5 years, George became head of EMI's Parlophone Records in London, England from 1955 to 1965. It was during this time that George Martin met Brian Epstein, the manager of the Beatles. George was responsible for signing the Beatles to their first ever recording contract in 1962 after hearing a few of the band's recordings. If it wasn't for that meeting between George Martin and Brian Epstein, the Beatles may have never been as big of an act as they have become. Fortunately, the meeting did happen, and the Beatles became a huge success. The relationship between the Beatles and George Martin grew over time. George Martin went on to produce every Beatles album from 1962 until the Beatles parted ways in 1970. George Martin was often referred to as the fifth Beatle, due to his uncanny ability to compose, arrange, and shape the Beatles songs into chart-topping hits. George Martin also wrote the scores for Eleanor Rigby, Strawberry Fields, and Yesterday. George also wrote the film scores to the Beatles' Yellow Submarine and Hard Day's Night films. When George Martin left EMI's Parlophone Records in 1965, he funded his very own recording studio called AIR, Associated Independent Recording Studios, in London, England in 1965, and then a second recording studio under the same name on the Caribbean island of Montserrat in 1979. This is where George Martin really got down to business with the Beatles recordings. George turned the entire studio into an instrument for live recordings. George Martin didn't just disappear when the Beatles broke up in 1970. He went on to work with a number of successful artists such as Jerry and the Pacemakers, Jeff Beck, Cilla Black, Tom Jones, Billy J. Kramer, Celine Dion, but the Beatles are by far his greatest accomplishment in my opinion. In my opinion, I think luck was on George Martin's side. He just so happened to be in the right place at the right time for that meeting with Brian Epstein. Don't get me wrong, he had all the knowledge required to become a big-time producer, and he did indeed capitalize on it. That to me is not only luck, but fate as well. I think we the people were supposed to hear the Beatles when we did and the way we did. Without that meeting, music today might not be the same. Think about some of the other great acts that fought so hard to keep up with the Beatles, like the Beach Boys, the Rolling Stones, and Bob Dylan, just to name a few. All in all, George Martin set off a chain of events that has provided us with a plethora of chart-topping hits and has forever left an impact in the music industry.